You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. The Option Block is brought to you by Tasty Trade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? Tasty Trade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. Tasty Trade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. Time to commence operations on this, a historic week, election week here in the U.S. So all of our international listeners just have to put up with us for a few more days, listeners. Then hopefully it will all be over and we will know the winner. That is the hope. That is the dream at the end of the day. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the network upon which all of you folks are busy mainlining these days. I hope you're gearing up. Hope you're getting ready for our big election night special tomorrow. I will be joined by a host, a bevy, a plethora of special guests to talk all things markets and the elections for, I'm going to say 3 hours. There's no real official end date at the end of it, so until my voice gives out. Luckily, I've tapped in Mr. Dr. Vix to be my Joan Rivers, so he will be on throughout the night with me, so when my voice fails, he could dive in. And, of course, a bevy of other special guests joining us pretty much every 15 to 30 minutes throughout that run. So it should be fun. Tune in, have some fun. If you're sick of the talking heads on all the other networks spinning all this nonsense, we're going to give it to you right down the middle with a lot of market analysis and history in there and all kinds of other fun stuff. And don't worry, if your candidate of choice is losing, we'll talk you off the ledge. If you're winning, hey, have a beer and celebrate. So it should be a fun time. Kicks off tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central. You'll see all the links. We'll put them all out for you so you folks can join live. If you only can catch part of it, all right, we'll try to put the rest of it on, of course, on demand afterwards so you can enjoy it at your leisure. Should be a fun time. Speaking of fun times, we got a fun one in store for us today. Joining me, of course, the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, as well as the rockingest of lobsters, Mr. Andrew Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. Andrew has his video on, so I can see he's already sweating. He's ready to go. For it is time, listeners, for our 80s Trivia Challenge. Here we go. All right. The 80s. Many crazy things happened in the 80s, including the second most lopsided victory in Electoral College history that occurred in 1984 in this election week. All right, Uncle Mike buzzing in. He doesn't even know the full question yet. I'm going to make it a little harder this week because we're trying to get real points here. So I want you, I said what it was already. I said the year, I think it was 1984. So I'll give you that. 1984 election. Mr. Uncle Mike, you need to name both full tickets, the top and the bottom half of each ticket. Who ran in 1984? Go, sir.
Oh, I thought it was going to be harder than that. I'm surprised you gave me that, but it would be Reagan Bush on the Republican side and Mondale Ferraro.
Oh, you remembered Ferraro.
Side.
That's the one I thought was going to trip you up. You remembered Geraldine Ferraro. Yes, the first woman to run for VP on a major party ticket. So interesting. It was a murder-saurus out there, to put it mildly. So Uncle Mike gets it. All right, here we go. Uncle Mike gets a point. But we're not done yet, listeners. 1 point.
That was a good one.
1 point.
I totally forgot about Dukakis and Ferraro. I would have
got
that.
it anyway. All right, so here we go. They're going to have a second question. This is going to be for a full point because it's not the easiest one. So put your thinking caps on. Uncle Mike, you could dig the hole deeper for the rock lobster. He could potentially dig himself out a little bit. It was a landslide. Reagan won 49 states. Apparently, it's only his number of votes, 525, is only the second largest, and someone got more. I think it was 1820. So going back
Yeah, I think I was getting ready to buzz.
Oh, you buzzed already? You don't know what the question is yet. I was going to say he won 49 states. He lost one state. Mondale won one state. Rock Lobster, what was it?
Mondale. What was his damn state? Minnesota?
Oh, Rock Lobster, look at you. Getting a full
That's
point.
what I was going to go with.
Look at you. Sometimes it pays
like
to
a
buzz
Minnesota
in.
guy, right?
Yeah, he was in Minnesota. He was that was his home state, which apparently he barely won by 0.18%. That was all he got. Full point for.
It's fine. That's what I thought the first question was going to be. And if you were going to, if you wouldn't have read the rest of the question instead of saying both tickets, I would have just said Minnesota because that's what I was guessing the question was going to be.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, I wanted to get to Minnesota. I thought for sure Ferraro would throw both of you off. So good job getting Ferraro, and good job, Mr. Rock Lobster, getting Minnesota. I should have known two Midwestern-y guys would have had more of a sense for me. Me growing up on the East Coast.
Oh, that's right. 88 was Dukakis. Who was Dukakis' running mate?
Lloyd Benson.
Yes. Look at Uncle Mike. VP trivia. I might have to do a whole VP trivia thing. You might have to prepare some VP trivia for the election night special tomorrow, Uncle Mike. Look at you.
Oh, boy.
Going big.
That's some good stuff there,
Lloyd Benson.
Tosaw. I got to give Tosaw
I had to dig deep for that one as well. That was a good one. All right, there we go. Uncle Mike.
I get Mondale and Dukakis confused. They're both kind of like the same.
Both kind of ended up being middling candidates at the end of the day, yes.
Yeah, like the same kind of
Unfortunately for their supporters, as we keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
Ah, yes, the trading block, the portion of the show where we can break down what the heck was trading out there. And who can ever forget the sight of Michael Dukakis riding that tank in that sweet, sweet helmet? Kind of just single-handedly derailed his campaign. But I digress out there. Let's see what's derailing these markets today. They were looking fair bit spooky. Looks like S&P. Actually, yeah, we did break 5,700 in the wrong direction. 56, looks like 56.96 or somewhere in that ballpark was about what we got to. It seems like maybe we got a little bit of the worm turning now. The market's not down quite as severe of a sell-off. Still off. S&P off about 0.25% right now. The Dow off over 0.5%, closing in on 0.6%. And our old pal, the NASDAQ, off almost 0.2% out there. So it looks like they have rebounded a bit from the lows. VIX cash hanging out at about a 22.10 right now. It puts it down about 0.3. Coming into the start of the show, it was actually pretty much unched. It was hanging out at 22.40. Almost everything was unched on the vol side, which is kind of weird. VVIX 123 unched from the Thursday show. So kind of doing a little bit of water treading heading into the big election night spectacular tomorrow. Small caps, by the way, listeners, bucking the trend, saying, you know what, everyone else is going red. We're going green today, making a full Christmas market up about 0.75% out there. So small caps, once again, doing their own thing out there. So we actually have two winners today, both getting a full point. Kind of interesting. Uncle Mike won the first official question, so he gets to go first. Uncle Mike, not quite an Uncle Mike type of day right now, but who knows? At this pace, if you wait 5 minutes, it might be. And if you have any other enduring memories going deep of the 1984 election, by all means, have at it. And then B, what's catching your eye out there in a kind of red day, sir?
I think I would say that growing up as a kid, I actually had aspirations of wanting to change the world and get into politics. And I had the party that I saw was the ideal party. And it just that's how you can solve the world's problems. But then as I got older, I realized that, one, I still had the same, I still have the same very similar political views as I had as a kid. But I'm realizing that the political party is really not the way with which to instill those views. And politics is kind of a dirty game. And I came to the conclusion years ago that I'm not for the elephant. I am not for the donkey. I'm for the lamb. I'll let our listeners figure out what that means. But with that being said, I do still find 80s trivia fascinating on the political front because let's face it, we had some really cool commercials back in the 80s for politics or for whatever you were looking at. It was good. And then you brought up the one about Dukakis in the tank. There's also with the George Bush one, 1,000 points of light, all the various things that all Reagan's one-liners that he had in the debates in the 80s. And there's just a lot of good stuff that happened in terms of just good quality TV with Dan Quayle spelling potato, Lloyd Benson saying, I knew John F. Kennedy and you are no John F. Kennedy in that debate. So
that guy messed me up for years as a kid. I would always think in the back of my mind, wait a minute, is there an E in potato? He injected that E into my brain for years. I blame Dan Quayle for that.
See, we don't have TV like that anymore. It's just about all the other parties. One party will say how the other party really hates each other and how the other party is going to end civilization as we know it. I mean, good gosh, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill used to pound beers together.
Yeah, they used to drink after the session. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I do still have. I wish we could go back to that simpler time, whether you're a Republican or Democrat or whatever, because we don't have enough of that anymore, by gosh. And so that's my 80s political memories, if you will. In terms of the markets for today, my man Bing Crosby's song of buy a bond. People are listening to Bing Crosby today because bonds are rallying. And so not up as much as they were earlier, but we definitely do have a little bit of a rally going in the bond market today. We have some buyers in the precious metals, and by buyers, there's really not a lot of them, but there are some buyers. SPX is down 6 points on the day. So we really don't have on the major markets, we really don't have a lot of big movers. And this is kind of what I expected. I did not expect the big moves that we saw last week. But today, if you were to tell me 3 weeks ago, the day before the election on the option block, the S&P is down 6 points, I'd say, yeah, that seems about right. So not a ton of movement. I think people are waiting to see just to make sure that the world doesn't end tomorrow with the wrong candidate getting in there. But on the daily movements, that's what I'm seeing at this stage. Some things that we've had overall lately is since earnings, Microsoft has not been too friendly. Mr. Softy has been soft in that Microsoft is down at the 407 level right now, up from 405. So we are getting some sellers there. Apple has been having a little bit of a sell-off since last week, and a lot of tech is just not moving in the bullish direction. And I guess just when you have such good earnings can only take you so far. At some stage, markets, even the tech stocks, have to take a breath. I mean, good gosh, NVIDIA's only up 1.8% on the day. So markets are taking a breath right now. And over the course of the next few days after the election, I think that we will get a little bit more movement one way or another. I don't see a major move in the market either way. We had someone on the futures side of RCM, just one of the futures clients was asking us for some type of an election put trade. And you might see something like that, but just in our research, elections don't necessarily move markets as much as you would think. Because let's go back to 2020, arguably the most chaotic time in the history of planet Earth. And with that, everyone knows what happened after the election, the night of the election, with COVID, with January 6th, with the election being rigged, this, that, or the other. There's never been more election chaos in history, but yet the market rallied. And so markets really don't care. Markets are the smartest thing outside of God. I think markets are the smartest thing that exists, because the markets know better than to know that one person is not bigger than the United States. The United States and our system, the greatest country in the history of mankind, is bigger than who wins tomorrow. Markets know that, and it was proven last election. So I think that we're going to have a little bit of hesitation, but overall, I think that we're not going to have any major moves regardless of who wins or what happens tomorrow. And so that is what I'm seeing today.
Interesting. Uncle Mike saying a big nothing burger to me. I was looking at the overnight moves. You're right, for 2016 in particular. That was a big one. I was on with Dr. Vix for that special way back in 2016. And man, I remember the moment he told me, I think Trump just won Ohio. We both kind of paused for a bit, and then the futures started selling off. It was crazy time. Then we ended up the next day. So yeah, crazy.
Yeah,
town.
but then we bounced back. Yeah,
crazy town out there. I was talking to Matt Amerson about this recently, the advisor's option. He was all excited because he had a whole bunch of downside on for the next morning. He's like, here we go, printing money, and then never got a chance to really monetize any of it. Ah, yes, crazy town out there. And speaking of crazy town, we know the shores of Maine are a crazy town. Mr. Rock Lobster, if you have any enduring memories, I believe you were 37 when this vote happened, the 1984 election, have at it. And then B, what's catching your eye in today's little bit of red market, sir?
Well, I was telling you guys earlier, I'm reading Winston Churchill's History of English-Speaking People. It's like 5 volumes, 6 volumes, basically kind of the history of England, America, mostly just England from the Romans till like World War II, basically.
Let me guess, he's all about the Duke of Marlborough. Duke of Marlborough is like his favorite person.
Oh, well, because that was his
ancestor. Yes, exactly. So he talks him up quite a bit.
But I'll just tell you, like the stuff we hear now, the things like just regular election stuff, man, the English fought for the same little island, bloody civil wars and battles for 1,000 freaking years. And I believe we are basically the beneficiaries of them kind of figuring a lot of stuff out by the time our Constitution came around. So all the stuff that we see now is nothing compared to what politics used to be like. Anyway, with that being said, 84, yeah, I miss those. You feel like the politicians were actually solving problems back then. And I feel like there's always been money in politics, but I feel like the government now hands out so much money to NGOs and other organizations. Like it's too big of a money grab at this point. It's just, and I think that does not help the average person. So everybody can take that with what they, the grain of salt, whatever, but that's kind of, I think, our political problem is nobody's, I think reasonable solutions. Nobody wants reasonable solutions. We all know simple problems. And, I think both parties make a lot of hay on problems that are relatively easily solved. And, Congress only needs to work like 3 months a year. And I think that would do us all a favor at this point. But anyway, so from the 80s, yeah, Reagan, I think he did some good things, did some bad things, like all politicians. Nobody's perfect. I think mostly what he did is he basically borrowed a lot of money and outspent the Russians and made them broke. That was like the number one thing. And he had some basic some good things, not great things, but he basically fought a war with the Russians, but it was a Cold War, and that's what I recall from that period of time. Because I believe, like, at the time, he spent more money than anything on the defense buildup. But it worked, right? We didn't have to go over the Russians, and the whole empire collapsed. So, a lot of that stuff costs money sometimes. As of right now, you look at the two, Trump was good for the market. Biden has been good for the market. It just depends on, how you get there. We've fairly, nobody can deny we had a very inflationary environment. Blame whoever you want, but Milton Friedman says it's government spending because it's a tax on all of us. So your taxes aren't necessarily going up, but the amount of debt we have to pay certainly has. And that's been the same for the last 24 years. So could that change if somebody cares? I don't think the Republican Congress majority cares very much because they just keep spending more money anyway. So, will something change? Who knows? So as far as from a market point of view, I think that's why there's a lot of betting odds shift, stuff like that. But ultimately, I think the market is still fueled on AI hopes. Earnings have been pretty good after they adjusted for interest, for higher rates and inflation. If you would have bought stocks in the 70s, you would have been very wealthy by the end of the 80s. It's like one of those things where the market got crushed because of, interest rates, oil prices, and just inflation, poor economic policy. Nixon didn't help that. And then all of a sudden, things got better with less regulation. Trump or whatever, Reagan came in and he cut taxes and stuff, which you could argue, did a lot. 80s were a pretty swinging time, and the 90s were a pretty swinging time. But that was the focus in the 90s was more on fiscal responsibility, the government not spending very much. And for the most part, that was probably one of the more successful economic policies. But you also had the internet, right, which certainly helped. And I think we're getting the benefits of that now 24 years later, especially with AI and everything else. So one thing is, if you look at our U.S. equities versus other markets, we tend to do better, a lot better than the Europeans, certainly better than China. And I think because of our system. So as long as our system kind of stays the same, it should do okay because there's some self-correcting in it, like the bond market right now. Tosaw was talking about bonds. The bond vigilantes are not going to just let the U.S. government spend a lot of money without charging interest rates for it. So we do have a lot of checks and balances in the system, which ultimately is the saving grace, which did not happen in England for a very, very long time. So that's the stuff when they wrote the Constitution that they wanted to have in there. So still working. From a market point of view, how many times you see the SPX down 3 points and VIX over 22? Not very often. We're 100 points, 2% from all-time highs, and VIX is 22. So I think the country just wants to get this election over. I would hope that not all elections are going to be like this. Because ultimately, just when you look at the policy, what policy you can find, nothing is really, I would say, earth-shattering by any stretch of the imagination as far as people's daily lives go. So I think some of the elections we had in the 1800s was much more pivotal or much more important for how the country worked going forward. We're mostly just trying to manage success. And I think that's the biggest problem. Everybody's just a little soft in the U.S. So right now, I would guess VIX is down a bunch by the end of the week. It would not surprise me that we just have a relief rally because everybody's tired of the election and all the nonsense. And we trade at an all-time high probably before Thanksgiving. None of that would surprise me and make new highs. As long as there isn't something, and I think the market, that's why the vol's so high, just some kind of strange thing that just might happen. Who knows? But the market is pricing that little tail risk. That's a small percentage. And that is what's holding volatility up right now. Plus the fact that we could rip 150 points in SPX like we do so much this year, 150, 200 points in a 2-week span, and in order for that to price, I think VIX is fairly priced than where it is at 22. So I think that's sort of how I see us going into this week. AI and growth there is still driving the boat. And at least for right now, I don't see any reason for that to stop.
No reason indeed, says the font of English history known as the rock lobster out there. Yeah, you want to see some turbulent political times, go look up the Wars of the Roses, right? They just killed everybody.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And then finally they were so done killing, they're like, no one's left. Who do we have? We have this Tudor guy. Yeah, he's like 50th in line of whatever, half brother or whatever. Just make him like, we're done. We're done killing each other. So yeah, they kind of just exhausted themselves with bloodshed, and then they decided to. So yeah, we're definitely looking better than that out there for all of you out there.
My favorite Winston Churchill line in those battles were "No quarter was given."
Yes. Churchill was very much a no quarter given kind of guy.
Yes,
out there.
No quarter was given.
I'm sure he has a whole chapter on the Dardanelles and what a success story that was for him, right? I'm sure he probably skipped that one, didn't he? In his history of the world. All right, let's keep rolling.
I haven't gotten to his history.
Oh,
yet,
okay, yes. He also, I think he wrote.
He's a little later.
I think he wrote like a 3-volume autobiography as well. I think the guy knew in order to spin your narrative, you had to kind of write it yourself, right? So not a fool, Mr. Churchill.
He definitely made some mistakes early in his career. Let's put it that way.
It is crazy that he was kicked out on his ear within 6 months of the end of World War II. He didn't last long at all. He was just in for World War II, and that was pretty much it. Then they tossed him out very quickly, which is kind of surprising. But this is not a discussion of English history. Speaking of really quickly of history, after our Columbus Day debate a few weeks ago out there, I've picked up a book called Conquistadors, I believe, which is all about, as I might say, the conquistadors. But the whole beginning chapters are all about Christopher Columbus, and after reading those, I doubled down on my stance that Columbus is a bit of an idiot, a duplicitous dude, pretty horrible guy, and didn't really know what the hell he was doing. Thought he was finding griffins in Asia. Thought he was walking the lands where Alexander the Great walked. Yeah, I can definitely see the crowd out there that say the heck with that guy. But enough Columbus. The Columbus show here and the English history show on the network. How are markets looking? As we were talking, I think the rock lobster taking that conciliatory tone kind of emboldened people because the NASDAQ turned green ever so briefly and the S&P hit 57.25. They're turning back red again now, but yeah, it looks like we did flirt with the green ever so briefly out there. In terms of flirting with stuff, VIX is flirting with some volume today. 1.17 million contracts on the tape already, listeners. That's some paper, as the kids say out there, including the big dog out there, a massive block, 100,000 of the NOB 17 puts expiring well after the election on November 20th. They traded for, I should say, 85 cents, right mid-market. They've done a total today of 223,000 on the day. So that is the big dog by far, followed by 134,000 of the NOB 17 puts. I might have a few of those in my back pocket for a rainy day. We're putting it out to you folks right now. Fun flash poll heading into the election. 85 cents heading into the election. NOB 17 puts. You like these? Are you a buyer or a seller at that price? We'll see what our audience has to say in a minute. SPY, no slouch today either. 5 million contracts on the tape. The ADV 7.11. So it seems like maybe we're finally getting some of that volume that's been, I would say, kind of delayed heading into the election. We would have seen a lot more of this volume, you would think, in the weeks leading into a lot of positioning. But we didn't, obviously, because 0 day now exists. So you don't have to be as set up ahead of time. You can just do it day of if you want, and then day after if you want to keep going again. The S, 1.85 million, is looking pretty heavy. The ADV, you usually expect them around 1.75 this time of day. The ADV, 3.08 million. Small caps also looking heavy, 906. The ADV, 1.16 million. And the Qs, 2.75 million. So about 500,000 more than we expect for them right now. The ADV, 3.91. So, yeah, we're looking and sounding pretty good out there on the markets volume-wise. So finally playing a little bit of catch-up on the volume front. What's not playing catch-up are the single names. It's like they forgot. Did no one tell the single names there's an election tomorrow? There's a whole heck of a lot of nothing. 184,000 is what it cost you to break into the top 10 today, listeners. That is pretty light. That is, dare I say it, dog days of summer on a usual year. Not this year. This year, the dog days of summer were explosive. But on a typical year, you're around 160, 180, and that's pretty much where we are right now. That gets us to the artist formerly known as Facebook. Meta, 184 on the tape, 564 even, off a little over 3, about 3.14% for Meta today in the number 10 spot. Number 9, my old stomping grounds, Intel, 22.40, off 3/4 of a buck or 3.25%. Not getting any love, getting kicked to the curb by the Dow for the hot new shiny young thing known as NVIDIA. Wow, that's got to hurt. Intel, once a tech bellwether. That's why I went out there. I was out there when they were added to the Dow. Maybe it was right before I got out there. But either way, I was out there around this time when they were added. Hot times. People were fighting, getting in fist fights to get into the Intel crowd. I had to deal with a hockey goon trying to take a literal professional hockey goon. Ask me that story someday, listeners. Trying to take my spot out there in the front of the Intel crowd, attached to the broker's terminal out there, sleeping over in the lobby of the exchange on the one bench that existed in the lobby of the SIBO just to be the first up the escalator in the morning to claim my spot in the world of treasure that was Intel. Intel and Microsoft, baby. The two behemoths of that era. And yeah, man, wow, how at least one of them has fallen right now. 22.5 bucks for Intel. Number 9 today, 209,000 contracts on the tape. Number 8, AMD, 141.75, off about a dime, 15 cents. Not really a huge underlying move for them today. 272,000 on the tape for them. Our old pal, TJT, still hanging out in the top 10. Number 7 today, 353, 33.92, up $3.36 because why not? I mean, that's literally all you can say with this name. Up a little over 10% today. Big day is tomorrow. We'll hopefully know by the end of the day tomorrow if this stock is 0 or 100. I don't think it's quite that simple, listeners, but it does have the feel of an election binary, does it not? So if you're trading DJT, don't confuse things. You're trading an election binary. You may just not know it. Number 6 is the Amazonians, 195.85, off about 210 or about 1% today. Good for 374,000 contracts. Number 5, Palantir, 41.75, off about 15 cents. They're clearly hoping for a Trump-Vance victory. Vance obviously very closely tied to Peter Thiel, who has all of his fortune in Palantir and somehow put it in an IRA. So well done for him, apparently. Just hiding all of that from taxes. Number 5, 382,000 contracts for Palantir. I got a feeling if they lose tomorrow, this stock probably taking a bit of a drubbing out there as well. Number 4, it's Apple, 414, 222.5, off about half a buck or 0.2%. Good for number 4, the 414,000 contracts. Number 3, SMCI. This one, you know, whenever there's the whiff of accounting scandals, that's no bueno. Over the last 5 days, it is off 45% or 21.5 handles. Looks like managing to stem the bleeding a little bit today, up about 15 cents or 0.5%, trading 26.20. Good for number 3, 584,000 contracts on the tape. Let's just look really quickly. Are folks betting on a recovery? If past is prologue, that seems to be the way it's going. Nove 30s, trading 270 going up today, 5,300 times. And then also another 5,000 later for 275. I think they were bid out there. I think so. Someone's buying the Nove 30s. Looks like maybe the Nove 27 or the 25, 27 vertical went up for $1, expiring on the 8th. All right, well, that one's already $1.25 in the money, I guess, so they're looking all right there. The stock was 24, that explains it. The stock was 24.48 when they put that on. So that one looking okay. Either way, SMCI, 584 on the tape. Number 2, number 1, you should hopefully know what they are by now. Number 2 is Tesla, 1.07 million. 244.75, off 3/4, off 4.25 or 1.7%. I got a feeling Trump's very closely linked to Musk too. Probably will take a bit of a hit if he does not win, and maybe if he does, maybe a little bit of a rally for Tesla. And then number 1 out there, we've got NVIDIA, 1.41 million, 137.70, up about 230 or 1.7% for them. Pretty light volume day across the board, even for NVIDIA. Earnings wise, we got some name called, easy for me to say, called Portillos, as the Rock Lobster calls it. Portillos, as the rest of the world knows it. Popping off tomorrow. I was just going to say who has earnings on election day, and Portillos is one of them. So we'll find out about how they're faring tomorrow. Palantir as well. Wynn Resorts Limited, All kinds of fun out there. Got some names popping off, Stu, really quickly. Palantir. I got another one, Election Day. Symbolic, maybe? Oh, I guess we'll see. Tomorrow after the bell. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Palantir's today after the bell. $42 is where they were trading. They're pricing in 5.25. In the past, they moved nearly $7. So taking about $1.75 off the top. Now, this name is moving. Is that wise? Tomorrow, Portillo's before the bell, $13.88. $1.15 is what they're pricing in the past. They moved to $1.08, so a little bit more juice. I think, given the fact that they're moving now more of this activist investor, you could probably argue for that. All right, and then speaking of numbers, so the numbers in for OCC. We'll get a deep dive into what happened and this month on the options volume front a little bit later. But right now, listeners, it is time to keep on rolling right on into the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, listeners, let's do it. Let's commence operations on the weird, the wild, the wondrous paper that is coming across our tape today, listeners. Let's kick things off out there in Global Star Inc., ticker symbol GSAT, G-S-A-T. Trading $1.76 right now, up 38 cents or 27.5%. So a banger day for GSAT out there. On the year, well, today saves them. A year ago, they were trading $1.42, so they were actually down on the year coming into the start of today. They're at $1.03 this morning. No, they're at $1.03 back last week on Halloween. From Halloween till now, they've rallied 75 cents almost. Quite the do, as the kids say, or about 75%. They got up to about 210. Looks like that was 212 actually was the high back on January 8th. So they topped out pretty quick. And ever since pretty much the rest of the year, heading into Halloween, they sold off to right around $1.03, $1.01. And they were hanging out there for that week heading into Halloween. Then on Halloween, just on the rampage up to the upside. Ah, yes, the old Apple investment. They're investing $1.5 billion. That'll do it. Apple floods you with cash. Morgan Stanley says this is now very encouraging. Well, those two things typically help a stock. And so that maybe explains what we're seeing out here today. Let's go out to GSAT. What did our Eye of Sauron find? I'm going to go out on a limb and guess it's probably calls, listeners. I've been doing this for a little bit. Probably calls. See, by the way, they are doing 19 times their normal volume. They also have earnings on the 7th. Why is the 7th the magical day for so many of these names? 7's going to be like everything's popping off. All the trades that we've been tracking, we'll know how they're working out after the 7th. Quite a few of them. But GSAT, yeah, nearly 20 times their usual volume, 19 times right now, including somebody came in this morning. They said, Jan 2 halves, how are they? They got a dime at 20 cents. They said, we will pay 19 cents, good sirs, for 9,923 of those bad boys. By the way, the stock was at $1.69 when they bought these. So obviously they got a little bit of a lift in the stock to the tune of about 7 cents. Not going to matter too much to these Jan 2 halves. Not a high delta option. Probably the size of their trade probably going to matter more in bidding up those options. But either way, they bought them. There are earnings, like I said, on November 7th. So we will know pretty soon whether these are a good do or not, as the kids say. Yeah, that Apple money just pretty much salvaging the year of this name out here. 2 halves? Is that a bit of a bridge too far? Would you prefer the 2s out there? Let's see if the 2s were lighting it up. Jan 2 halves. Jan 2s. Here we go. What were they going for today? They were going for prices around 20 to 25 cents. The stock at the time, well, the stock was 148. I don't think you're getting the 2s for 20 cents now. But no, even at 179, the 2s are only 25 cents. So, I don't know, 2 halves for 19 cents in Jan, or the 2s for 25. I'm going the twos all day long for 25 cents. I don't know, Mr. Rock Lobster, what are your thoughts on these Jan 2 halves for 19 cents? And then with the stock around the same level, you could have got the twos for 25 cents. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, do you not find this strategic purchase investment by Apple interesting?
Yeah, well, they're sitting on $87 trillion in cash. You got to do something with it, right?
Right. Well, because like Musk has Global Star or his or whatever the some data link or whatever it's called. I forget whatever his satellite network system, his internet satellite system is. Global Star, I think, Global Link. Anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. But maybe Apple is like, maybe we should get into this infrastructure game a little bit. So I find that interesting. Jan 2025, 2.5 calls. It's one of those where the viceroy would say just buy the stock. But yeah, if they're actually, could be a going concern and supply Apple with something, then, that could be interesting. I was trying to find out if Global Star was the old, I don't know if you remember, but Phil Falcone, he tried to create like a satellite cell phone company, but I think it all sort of went bad. I couldn't remember if it was Global Star or not though. But yeah, you buy the 2.5s, the twos are, I think you could probably buy a better call. But I mean, at least right now they bought a little duration. When was the last time that stock was $2.5 though? So yeah, I mean, it has not been over $2. It's about beginning of the year. So, it's got a shot. It has a shot, but yeah, I'd probably just end up I'd rather buy the stock. I'm going to add it to my year low list though, because it's doing a little bounce here, but maybe Apple can make it make it bounce. But I don't think they're you're paying 10% of the value of the underlying, which is at least. So it's a pricey call. I'd probably just buy the stock instead.
Yeah, I don't love those. I looked them up right now. Those twos are now 25 cents at 30. So they're bid out a little bit. So 30 cents. Maybe if you get some for 25, maybe you work a bid, maybe you get some. But yeah, you can't go wrong if you think this thing is a going concern. It is, you're right, only $1.79 for the permanent non-expiring call. So in the wise words of the viceroy, that could be a good do as well. Speaking of good do's, let's check in on some of these trades we just talked about recently on the show. Let's see how good they turned out, shall we, listeners? Let's go out first to, this is just a week ago. Last Monday on the show, we talked about ON Semiconductor Corp, ticker symbol ON. This is that American semi-manufacturer out of Scottsdale. And not going to tell you where they are just yet. A little bit of a spoiler out there. But a year ago, they were $66, and they shot up to about $86 in December. And that was pretty much their high for the year. Then they crushed it down to $60, actually $59 in April. Then they kind of were vacillating around the high 70s. They got down again to the mid 60s on October 22nd. When we talked about it on the show last week, the stock was $72.50, and paper came in and said, no 78s expiring last Friday on the 1st. How are they? And they got 23 cents at 24, a weirdly tight market, which makes me think maybe something was lurking out there. But either way, they said, we will pay 24 cents, 1,793 times for these bad boys, these Nove 78s. At the time last week, we thought, man, that is a lot. I think I said on the show last week that this is the bridge past the bridge too far for these calls. You got to get all the way up. At the time, the stock had rallied, I think, up to like 73, almost $74. And still these calls were nowhere to be found. They had earnings that day before the opens. That was another weird one. You don't even have the announcement to come. You already have the announcement. Vol is bleeding out as we speak. Even though I think we said last week something was afoot because the vol wasn't really bleeding out as aggressively after the announcement. So that was working in their favor. But either way, the stock was around 73 and change, and these calls still had a long way to go. Over $4. It didn't look good by the end of the week. And the stock on expiration Friday, listeners, let's see, where did it go out on Friday? It was trading $70.33 in the morning on Friday. Looks like we went out Friday around $71, 71 and change. Either way, nowhere near the 78 handle. Those calls were still open as of Friday afternoon, and these were obviously not looking good. And Mr. Rock Lobster, we called it on the show last week. There's a bridge too far, and then there's these calls, and they never really had a chance. 24 cents out the window, 1,793 times. They dropped about 43 grand on this bad boy. I can't say I'm surprised. Are you, sir?
I like that, the bridge too far calls. We have line in the sand puts, and we have bridge too far calls. I think that should be a permanent moniker here. Permanent
addition to the repertoire.
Yeah, but again, like, you're betting on a week to go, and the time she go tick-tock no matter what. So that's a very hard that's a hard pill to swallow. A cheap shot, but I guess it's a $43,000 cheap shot, so it's all relative.
Yeah, what's 43 grand amongst friends, right?
Yeah.
A decent mid-sized car, or, this trade for a couple of days. Everyone has their preferences, listeners. As we get on out to, let's pay off this one as well. I mean, you might have touched on this one already, but I want to make sure we pay it off officially. We go back to everyone's favorite Up FinTech Holdings. This thing's been all over the place. It was the hot name back in the China rampage of about a month ago, listeners. On October 7th on the show, everyone and their mother was loading up on Tiger, upside, 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 upside. And it was getting pretty elaborate. One of the best we saw, though, of all the upside that we saw, a lot of which came to pay off. Not all of it, obviously, including these. Spoiler alert. When the stock was $12.73, someone came in and said, you know what, this Chinese thing, this is the wave of the future. I got to get in. A lot of people we saw were buying Nove, so they're still open. They still have some time. Stock's not looking great, but they still have time. This person decided he knew better than everybody else. He said, you know what? I'm going farther out of the money, and I'm going closer to expiration than everybody else. I'm buying the OC25s for 35 cents, lifting the offer 2,095 times with the stock at $12.73. They don't even have earnings yet. Earnings are on November 25th. So if you bought Nove, you're even too soon. You got to go out really to the December contracts to get the earnings bump. So this person didn't wait for any of that. He said, I'll take these now. And you know what, listeners? Let's see. Over the last month, how high did we get? It's like on October 4th, it hit 12.39. Maybe intraday got up to 14.48. So that was October 4th. That was before this trade. So he already was buying the downturn then. And the stock never really looked back. It closed at $7.22 on expiration. The stock is $6.62 now, so it sucks even more. These calls were still open. They never had a chance. Who are you going to sell the 25s to? So they threw all that money away. 73 grand on this bad boy, Mr. Rocklap. So I guess if the last one were the bridge, past the bridge too far calls, this is like, I don't know, the next county, these calls. What are your thoughts on just throwing all the money away, never having a shot in Tiger, sir?
Well, it just kind of makes me giggle when whatever. You buy the OC25s and then you see stock closed at 722. It has a funny ring to it. So there's not much. I could have sworn we looked at these and we were like, what the heck? But it was I think Chinese equities are almost becoming like Brazilian equities. You always think, this is going to be the year. And so I think this particular buyer, they ran out of time.
I think if they had another 5 years, they might still be out of time, but I don't know. That's a long way for this stock to go. But they sure as hell didn't do themselves any favors buying October. Yeah, October, forget about it, listeners. But you know what? Don't forget about Uncle Mike, because it's time for the strategy block.
It's time to dispense options wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the Strategy Block.
All right, listeners, it is time for Uncle Mike to go deep on the results of the 1984 presidential election. Have at it, sir. You have about 7 minutes.
Well, a little bit of other useless trivia. I'm not actually sure about it, but I think that the only election that was more of a landslide than that, I think that, because didn't Nixon really beat McGovern in 74? I thought that was like a similar amount of electoral votes, but not quite sure on it. But that's about as deep as I can go on 80s electoral voting history. But what I do want to talk about is letting your winners ride and protecting them. So in other words, we're coming towards the end of the year. And at the end of the year, of course, a lot of people are doing various tax loss harvesting strategies. So let's say that you have one stock that is high in value, that's done really well. You sell it, but shoot, I don't really want to sell it, but because I got to pay that doggone capital gains tax. Well, maybe you have some other stocks that have not done so well that are down in value, and you sell them. The loss on those stocks offsets the gain on your gainers. And then by doing that, you have the ability to do what's called a tax loss harvest. Now, that can be good, that can be bad. There's a lot more to it. But what I want to talk to you about today is if you have stocks that are winners, and you're at a point where it's like, I really don't want to sell them in 2024 because based on my tax situation, I don't want to take the gains this year. I just can't do it because I have this, that, and the other, whatever, because you don't want to pay the doggone capital gains tax, whether it's long-term or short-term in 2024. I got to wait. Or I really don't want to sell them, but they've just gone up so doggone much lately. What can I do? Well, one thing that you can do is buy a put option. Now, put options on individual stocks, sometimes they can be costly. Now, not against put options on individual stocks. I own put options on individual stocks as we speak for clients. But let's say that you've had quite the bullish year in your stock portfolio. It's very possible we've had quite the bullish market this year. Well, if that's the case, then you may want to consider some type of an index put as a way with which to hedge yourself. If you're using a put on an index, whether it's the SPX, the Dow, the NASDAQ, a lot of times you can get 60-40 tax treatment. And by doing that, let's say that the market does tank and the index actually does match your stock portfolio, then the gains on the put are taxed at the 60-40 tax rate, meaning 60% long-term, 40% short-term, as opposed to buying puts on the individual names. If that's something with which you're interested in, it's something that you should consider instead of looking at individual names. Not saying that you shouldn't, but something that you should definitely consider because oftentimes the cost on index is less and oftentimes the tax treatment can be less depending on how you set it up. Doesn't work every time, but something with which to consider. If you are interested in more information on this, go to adaptivewebinars.com immediately following this show, and I will be doing a webinar on it at 1 p.m. Central. And that is my strategy block.
And immediately following this segment, we will go into Around the Block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, listeners, as we're coming into the end of the show here, NASDAQ is now green, up about 0.05%. S&P still red, but slightly off about 0.07%. Dow off about 0.5%. And VIX cash hanging out right around where we started the show, 2210. So not much evolution there. Looking at Uncle Mike's surprising fact, Reagan, his victory over Mondale, 17 million popular votes. That's pretty huge. Hard to see that again these days. The second largest in history, surpassed only by Nixon's margin over McGovern in 1972. So Uncle Mike pulling out another rabbit out of his hat. By the way, his electoral landslide, 525-13, second only to FDR's 523-8 margin over everyone's favorite, Alf Landon. Who can forget him? In 1936, Alf Landon. My goodness, what a name lost to history. out there. So intriguing nuggets. More of this fun to come tomorrow, listeners, on the election night extravaganza. Speaking of extravaganzas, our flash poll is live. You folks are liking these NOV 17 puts expiring on the 20th for 85 cents. 81.8% of you right now say you want to buy them. Only 18.2% say you want to sell them. So that is intriguing. Mr. Rock Lobster, what are your thoughts? Are you a buyer or a seller of those puts? And then B, what are you keeping an eye on until our next show, or even until tomorrow's next election extravaganza, sir?
And what puts are we talking about that I'm supposed to be buying?
17 puts expiring on the 20th for 85 cents. Buying or selling?
Oh, I already own a lot of those.
Yeah, so do I.
I do own some of those. So yeah, it's one of these things where like every election vol has gone down. This could be one where it doesn't. I'm still on some upside. I think there will be a big sigh of just this election is over and will just people act like normal human beings again. But it's possible it doesn't happen. But that's what the market is pricing, that little tail that it doesn't happen. So, yeah, I think the 17 puts will probably trade for at least $3 at one point. That would be my guess.
That'd be nice. And where should folks go if they want more Rock Lobster goodness in their life?
Oh, yeah, that speaks. I got a class to do. 888-TRADE-01, optionpit.com. Check out all my products if you want to learn how to do all this stuff, because I realize I got to go teach a class.
You go fulfill.
I must fulfill.
You go fulfill. As we, Uncle Mike, sir, what is your vote? You like those puts? You buying or selling? And then we obviously know what you're keeping an eye on. It's the election. It's the big thing. Where should folks go if they want more Uncle Mike goodness?
If I had to be a buyer or a seller, I would be a buyer. But with that being said, if you want to learn more about what I'm doing, if you want a financial advisor who is not afraid of the option product, go to stcharleswealth.com and follow me on Twitter at Mike Tosaw, Tosaw. If you want to see the webinar I'm going to start in about 30 seconds, adaptivewebinars.com.
30 seconds for the Uncle Mike webinar, man. Save up your voice, Uncle Mike, because you got some talking to do tomorrow. So do I, listeners. The producers are kind. They cleared my schedule for tomorrow so that I can rest up my voice until the madness begins. 3 straight hours plus. Who knows when we're going to end? Maybe the Rock Lobster, I should say the Rock. Dr. Vix and I will just keep going. Past midnight, we'll just have the spirit in us. Who knows? Maybe madness going about him. But yeah, it's fun times out there. Join us tomorrow. But we're not done yet today. Join us back here in a little bit. Or, of course, if you're listening on demand, like a lot of you are, just hit next on your device of choice. We'll be talking all things crypto, listeners, on the Crypto Rundown, a.k.a. Uncle Mike's favorite thing. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, the day is upon us. We've been talking about it all year. We've been seeing it priced into the VIX term structure all year. It's finally here, listeners. We'll see what madness is in store for us tomorrow on the election night special. We'll see you back here. Things are crazy out there right now. I mean it quite literally. Stay safe out there. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the election night special. Then, of course, back again on Thursday. Hopefully, calmer, saner heads can prevail with another episode. I'll be live, actually, from the SIBO if everything hasn't burned down by then with the Flow Master. See you then. Next episode of The Option Block.
The Option Block is brought to you by Tasty Trade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? Tasty Trade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. Tasty Trade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.